The officer lied so smoothly that even the courtroom seemed to believe him before the judge could blink. Officer Daniel Whitaker stood in the witness box with one hand resting near his polished badge, his Navy uniform pressed sharp, his face calm in the way powerful men become calm when they think the room already belongs to them. Across from him, Alicia Monroe stood beside the defense table in a worn brown coat still damp from the morning rain, her wrists free now but faintly marked from the cuffs that had been removed only minutes earlier. The fluorescent lights above made everything look colder than it was. The oak benches, the pale walls, the flag behind Judge Evelyn Harper, the faces of strangers who had already decided what kind of woman Alicia must be. Whitaker lifted his chin and spoke clearly. She became aggressive during a lawful stop, Your Honor. She refused instructions, attempted to flee, and I personally recovered narcotics from the inside pocket of her coat. A soft murmur moved through the courtroom like wind under a door. Alicia did not move. She did not gasp, shake her head, or look toward the small cluster of reporters near the back row. She simply kept her eyes on him, steady and quiet, as if she were listening to a man read the final page of a book he did not know she had written. Her public defender, Marcus Reed, leaned toward her and whispered that they could challenge the search, maybe request a continuance, maybe ask for the body camera footage if it had not mysteriously failed like the report claimed. His voice was kind, but nervous. He thought he was standing beside another black woman swallowed by a system that could mistake silence for guilt and poverty for proof. Alicia heard him, but her attention stayed on Whitaker. The officer's shoes were freshly shined. His testimony was too rehearsed. His eyes kept drifting, not to the judge, not to the prosecutor, but to the evidence table where Alicia's coat sat sealed in a clear plastic bag. That was the first mistake. The second was the smile. It appeared for less than a second when the prosecutor asked if he was certain about what he found, but Alicia saw it. She had spent months watching Daniel Whitaker smile like that in parking lots, courthouse hallways, traffic stops, and dim precinct offices where men with power lowered their voices before doing things they thought no one important would ever notice. Judge Harper adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file. "Miss Monroe," she said, "the charge before this court is serious." Alicia finally turned her head. Her voice, when it came, was low, controlled, and clear enough to make the front row stop breathing. "Your Honor, may I ask Officer Whitaker one question?" Marcus froze. The prosecutor frowned. Whitaker almost laughed, but caught himself. Judge Harper studied Alicia for a long moment, seeing the wet coat, the calm face, the strange stillness that did not match the fear most defendants carried into her courtroom. "One question," she said. Alicia rose slowly. The room tightened around her. Rain tapped against the tall courthouse windows, each drop small and patient. She faced Whitaker, not with anger, not with pleading, but with the quiet weight of someone giving a man one last chance to tell the truth. "Officer Whitaker," she asked, "did you personally search my coat pocket?" Whitaker leaned back slightly, offended by the simplicity of it. "Yes, I did." "And you personally found the drugs there?" "Yes." "In the inside pocket?" "That is correct." Alicia nodded once, then looked at the sealed evidence bag on the table. For the first time, the officer's smile disappeared. Alicia let the silence sit long enough for the room to feel its own weight. Then she turned from Officer Whitaker to the evidence table, where the clear plastic bag held the brown coat like a memory no one wanted to touch. The coat was ordinary, almost painfully ordinary, with a frayed sleeve cuff, a missing button near the collar, and rainwater darkening the hem. To most people in the courtroom, it looked like poverty. To Alicia, it was a carefully chosen piece of evidence. Marcus Reed stood frozen beside her, one hand hovering above his notepad, his mouth slightly open as if he had forgotten how to be her lawyer. He had met her less than 1 hour earlier in a narrow holding room downstairs, where the air smelled of metal benches, old coffee, and floor cleaner. She had sat across from him with her hands folded, answering every question politely, but giving almost nothing away. No family waiting outside. No emergency contact. No panic. When Marcus asked what she did for work, she had only said, "I observe people." He thought she meant she was unemployed, or embarrassed, or too tired to explain. Now, in the bright chill of the courtroom, he wondered if he had missed something sitting right in front of him. Judge Harper leaned forward. "Miss Monroe, where are you going with this?" Alicia did not rush. Rushing was for people trying to outrun fear. She had learned patience in places much colder than this courtroom, behind tinted windows, in motel parking lots, in precinct lobbies where the same names appeared again and again on complaints that vanished before sunrise. Daniel Whitaker had been one of those names. Not the loudest at first, not the most careless. That was why the Bureau had watched him longer. Men like Whitaker survived by knowing when to look respectable. He wore courtesy like another layer of body armor. He said ma'am to judges, shook hands with prosecutors, smiled at cameras during community events, and saved his real face for people no one believed. Alicia had seen that face 3 nights earlier on the east side of the city, under a broken streetlight outside a closed laundromat, when Whitaker stopped her without cause and searched her coat with the confidence of a man following a script. He had not known the thread inside the seam held a micro camera smaller than a shirt button. He had not known the plain sedan half a block away carried 2 federal agents listening to every word. He had only seen a black woman alone after dark and believed the story would be easy to write. Now that story was standing in court, breathing. Alicia looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, I would like the coat removed from the evidence bag and inspected in open court." The prosecutor objected immediately, his voice sharp enough to crack the stillness. Judge Harper lifted one hand, not looking away from Alicia. Overruled. The bailiff stepped forward, broke the seal, and lifted the coat carefully. The plastic rustled like dry leaves. Every eye followed his hands. Whitaker shifted in the witness box. It was small, almost nothing, just a change in posture, but Alicia saw it. The bailiff checked the outer pockets first. Empty. Then he turned the coat inside out. The lining showed plain stitching, worn fabric, no hidden compartment, no inner pocket, no place for what Whitaker had sworn he found. The courtroom became so quiet that the rain against the glass sounded close enough to touch. Alicia looked back at Whitaker. She did not smile. That would have made it about revenge. This was not revenge. This was documentation. This was every ignored complaint walking into daylight. This was the moment a man who had trusted the weight of his badge began to feel the weight of his words. The bailiff held the coat under the courtroom lights, turning it slowly as if the missing pocket might appear if everyone stared hard enough. It did not. There was only brown fabric, worn stitching, and the plain truth hanging from his hands. Judge Harper removed her glasses. "Officer Whitaker," she said, her voice lower now, "you testified under oath that you recovered narcotics from an inside pocket of this coat." Whitaker swallowed, but his face tried to remain professional. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then explain to this court how you recovered evidence from a pocket that does not exist." A sound moved through the benches, not loud, not organized, just the human noise of certainty beginning to crack. The prosecutor looked down at his file, as if the paper might rescue him. Marcus Reed slowly sat back down, his eyes moving from the coat to Alicia, from Alicia to Whitaker, trying to understand why his client looked less like a defendant with each passing second. Alicia remained standing. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the table. She could feel the old wood beneath her fingertips, smooth in some places, nicked in others by years of nervous people gripping it, while strangers decided what their lives were worth. For a moment, she thought of the names in the federal case file. Jamal Turner, arrested after a traffic stop that began with a broken taillight no photograph ever proved. Renee Watkins, a nurse who lost her job after a charge that quietly fell apart months later. Calvin Brooks, a father of 2 who took a plea because he could not afford to fight a uniform. Each report carried Whitaker's careful language. Suspicious movement. Aggressive posture. Probable cause. Words polished until they looked official. Words heavy enough to bend a life. Alicia had read them all at her kitchen table under a small lamp while the city slept outside her apartment window. She had circled patterns in red ink. Dates, locations, witness gaps, missing footage. She had listened to recordings, watched street cameras, studied complaints dismissed as anger or confusion. By the time she stepped into that laundromat parking lot 3 nights ago, she was not walking into danger. She was walking into a pattern. Whitaker shifted again. The badge on his chest caught the light, bright and useless. "There must have been a mistake with the evidence log," he said. "Maybe the coat was altered after intake." The words came too quickly. Judge Harper's eyes hardened. Altered by whom? Whitaker glanced toward the prosecutor, then the clerk, then the bailiff, searching the room for someone lower than himself to carry the blame. Alicia watched him do it. That was his instinct. Push the weight downward. Let someone smaller stand under it. Your Honor, Alicia said, may I respond? The judge nodded once. Alicia turned slightly so the whole courtroom could hear her. The coat was photographed at the scene, at intake, and again when it was sealed. It was never altered. Whitaker's head snapped toward her. You would not know that. Alicia held his stare. I would. The air changed. It was not dramatic yet. No one had rushed through the doors. No one had shouted. But the room sensed a door inside the truth had just opened. Marcus whispered, Miss Monroe, how do you know that? Alicia did not answer him. Not yet. Instead, she looked toward the back row, where an elderly black woman sat with both hands wrapped around a tissue she had twisted nearly to pieces. Mrs. Lorraine Turner, Jamal Turner's mother. Alicia had visited her 2 months earlier under another name. Sitting in her small living room while the woman showed her a graduation photo and said, My son is not perfect, but he is not what that officer made him. Alicia had promised nothing then. Promises were cheap. Evidence was better. Now Mrs. Turner's eyes met hers across the courtroom, tired and shining, and Alicia felt the full weight of why she had stayed silent this long. Not to protect herself. To make sure Whitaker could not slip out through a technicality, a missing form, a confused witness, a story rewritten in the hallway. Judge Harper leaned forward. Miss Monroe, if you have knowledge about the evidence chain, this court needs to know why. Alicia drew a slow breath. Rain traced the glass behind the judge in thin, silver lines. Whitaker's face had gone still, but his right hand curled against the witness stand. He knew something now. Not everything. Just enough to be afraid. Alicia reached into the folder Marcus had not noticed beneath the defense table and touched the sealed envelope inside. The paper felt cool, almost ordinary. But inside it was the first thread of the thing that would pull Daniel Whitaker's entire career into the light. She looked at the judge and said, Your Honor, before I answer, I request that Officer Whitaker remain under oath and that no one leave this courtroom. Judge Harper did not answer immediately. She looked at Alicia, then at Officer Whitaker, then at the coat still hanging from the bailiff's hands like a question no one could fold away. The courtroom had changed shape without anyone moving. A few minutes earlier, Alicia had been the woman at the defense table, the one people watched with quiet suspicion. Now every breath seemed to lean toward her. The prosecutor rose halfway from his chair. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Judge Harper lifted her eyes. So is sworn testimony about a pocket that does not exist. Sit down, counselor. The prosecutor sat. Marcus Reed stared at Alicia as if he were seeing the outline of a person hidden behind fog. He wanted to ask who she was, why she had not told him, why she had let him walk into court unprepared. But something in her face stopped him. It was not arrogance. It was restraint, the kind that costs something. Alicia opened the folder slowly. Paper moved against paper, soft and deliberate. Officer Whitaker watched her hand as if it were reaching toward a switch that could cut the lights from his life. Alicia removed one document, then another, but she did not reveal the envelope yet. Not before the question that mattered. She turned back to the witness box. Officer Whitaker, on the night of my arrest, you stated in your report that your body camera malfunctioned at 6:42 in the evening. Is that correct? Whitaker's jaw worked once. Yes. Equipment failure. And your patrol car camera? Same issue. And the nearby business cameras? The laundromat was closed. Their system was not working. Alicia nodded gently, as though he had just stepped exactly where she had placed the mark. 3 cameras failed, at the same location, during the same stop, while you recovered evidence from a pocket that does not exist. Whitaker's face tightened. Are you questioning me or testifying? I am giving you room to clarify, Alicia said. The words landed softly, but they cut through the courtroom. A man in the back row lowered his phone. A clerk stopped typing. Judge Harper leaned back, her expression unreadable, but her fingers rested near the gavel. Whitaker gave a dry laugh. This is what they do, Your Honor. They get caught. Then they try to make the officer look dirty. The room stiffened. Alicia felt Marcus shift beside her. She felt Mrs. Turner's pain from the last row as if it had crossed the room and settled near her shoulder. But Alicia did not let anger take the wheel. Anger was too easy for men like Whitaker to rename. He could call it attitude. He could call it threat. He could write it into a report and make it sound official. So Alicia stayed still. She looked at him the way an honest mirror looks at a dishonest face. Officer Whitaker, she said, when you say they, who do you mean? The question was simple. Too simple. Whitaker blinked. I mean suspects. Alicia let the pause breathe. Black suspects? The prosecutor stood again. Objection. Judge Harper did not take her eyes off Whitaker. Overruled. Answer the question. Whitaker adjusted his collar. I meant people who break the law. Alicia looked down at the papers in her hand. Then you should have no problem explaining why. Over the past 18 months, nearly every disputed search connected to your name involved a black driver, a black pedestrian, or a black resident in neighborhoods outside your assigned patrol zone. The courtroom went silent in a deeper way now. Not surprised. Ashamed. As if the walls had heard this before and were tired of holding it. Whitaker's voice came out flat. I go where crime is. Alicia stepped closer to the defense table, never crossing the space the judge had not granted her. No, she said quietly. You went where you thought no one had enough power to question you. For the first time, Whitaker looked less like a decorated officer and more like a man standing in borrowed light. Judge Harper's voice cut in. Miss Monroe, do you have evidence supporting that statement? Alicia touched the sealed envelope at last. Yes, Your Honor. And I believe the court should see it before Officer Whitaker changes his testimony again. Alicia held the sealed envelope between two fingers, but she did not open it yet. The paper was thin, cream-colored, and marked with a federal evidence label that suddenly made the prosecutor stop breathing through his objection. Judge Harper saw the label. So did Marcus Reed. So did Officer Daniel Whitaker, whose face had gone pale beneath the courtroom lights. Your Honor, the prosecutor said carefully, may we approach? No, Judge Harper replied. Not yet. Miss Monroe, explain what you are presenting. Alicia looked at the envelope, then at Whitaker. This contains certified still images from a camera placed across from the laundromat on the night of my arrest, along with timestamps from 6:38 to 6:51 in the evening. Whitaker straightened too quickly. That area had no working cameras. Alicia turned her head slightly. That is what you wrote. A ripple moved through the benches. The judge lifted one hand, and the room settled again, but not fully. Some silences obey. This one only tightened. Alicia continued, calm enough to make every word heavier. The camera was not owned by the laundromat. It belonged to a federal vehicle parked 42 feet away from the stop. Marcus's pen slipped from his hand and clicked against the table. The sound seemed enormous. Whitaker stared at Alicia, and for the first time there was no performance left in his eyes, only calculation. He was measuring distance now, not feet, but exits. Reputation. Damage. Judge Harper's mouth pressed into a thin line. Miss Monroe, why would a federal vehicle be recording a local police stop? Alicia drew a slow breath. Because Officer Whitaker was already under federal investigation. The words did not explode. They sank. One by one, faces in the courtroom changed as the meaning reached them. The prosecutor looked at Whitaker as if a stranger had taken his place in the witness box. The bailiff, still holding the coat, lowered it slightly. Mrs. Turner covered her mouth with the tissue in her hand. Whitaker laughed once, short and empty. This is ridiculous. She is desperate. She is trying to save herself. Alicia did not look away. Officer Whitaker, you testified that I fled. The images show I stood still. You testified that I refused instructions. The audio shows I complied. You testified that you found evidence in my coat. The coat has no such pocket. Whitaker's voice sharpened. She is manipulating this court. You do not even know who she is. Judge Harper looked at Alicia. Then perhaps it is time we do. The rain outside softened, turning the windows into gray mirrors. Alicia felt every eye on her, but she also felt the months behind her, the careful waiting, the swallowed humiliation, the nights when she had sat in her car and watched Whitaker stop people who looked like her, people he thought would be too tired, too poor, or too afraid to be believed. She had not entered this courtroom to prove her own innocence. That had never been the real mission. She reached into the folder and removed a second document. This one folded once, bearing a badge number, a case number, and a name she had not spoken in public since the operation began. Marcus whispered, Alicia? His voice was no longer legal. It was human. She glanced at him, softening just enough for him to understand that he had not failed her. He had simply been defending a woman who was never alone. Then she faced Judge Harper and placed the document on the table. My legal name is Alicia Denise Monroe, she said. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. assigned undercover to a civil rights corruption probe involving Officer Daniel Whitaker and multiple unlawful arrests in this district. No one moved. Even the air seemed to stop above the wooden benches. Whitaker's hand slid from the witness rail. The badge on his chest no longer looked like authority. It looked like evidence. Judge Harper read the document once, then again, slower. Her expression changed in a way Alicia would remember for years. Not shock exactly, but recognition. The solemn realization that the woman standing before her had allowed herself to be misjudged so the truth could walk in clean. The judge looked up. "Officer Whitaker," she said, "remain exactly where you are." Judge Harper's order settled over the courtroom like a locked door. Officer Whitaker did not move, but something in him had already started backing away. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes flicked to the side entrance, then to the prosecutor, then to the badge on his own chest, as if each object had betrayed him by remaining exactly where it was. Alicia stood in the same place she had occupied since the hearing began, but the room no longer knew how to look at her. A few minutes earlier, they had seen a black woman in a worn coat, a defendant, a file number, a problem to process before lunch. Now they saw the federal credentials on the judge's bench, the sealed evidence envelope, the coat with no inside pocket, and the quiet discipline of a woman who had let every insult land because the truth needed Whitaker's voice recorded under oath. Marcus Reed lowered himself into his chair, one hand covering his mouth. He thought of the holding room downstairs, the way Alicia had thanked him for showing up, the way she had allowed him to explain basic courtroom procedure without correcting him once. She could have humiliated him. She had chosen kindness instead. That realization hit him harder than the revelation itself. Judge Harper read the federal document again, then looked toward the clerk. "Seal the courtroom record from public release until federal counsel confirms what may be disclosed." The clerk nodded quickly. The reporters at the back began whispering, but one sharp look from the bailiff quieted them. Outside, the rain faded into a fine mist, leaving silver trails on the tall windows. For the first time all morning, the room heard small things: the hum of the lights, the old wood settling, Mrs. Turner's unsteady breath in the last row. Alicia turned toward her. Not fully, just enough. The elderly woman was crying now, but quietly, the way people cry when hope feels dangerous. Alicia remembered sitting in Mrs. Turner's apartment, accepting a glass of sweet tea she had not asked for, listening while the woman described Jamal as a boy who hated onions, loved old baseball cards, and called every Sunday until the arrest changed his voice. Back then, Alicia had wanted to say, "I believe you." Instead, she had said, "I will look carefully." It was colder, but safer. Today, carefully had become visible. Whitaker finally spoke. "Your Honor, I need representation." His voice had lost its shine. Judge Harper nodded once. "You will have every legal protection this court provides." Alicia felt the sentence pass through her with unexpected force. Every legal protection. Even him. Even now. That was the difference between justice and revenge, and she held on to it because too many people had been denied that difference. She looked at Whitaker, not with triumph, but with a sadness that made him look away. "You used the courtroom like a stage," she said quietly. "But people's lives are not props." The words did not need volume. They reached every bench. Judge Harper folded the document and placed it beside the evidence envelope. Then, from the hallway beyond the courtroom doors, came the clean sound of footsteps approaching in unison. Alicia did not turn. She already knew the rhythm. Federal agents did not rush when they had waited this long. The courtroom doors opened with a slow wooden groan, and every head turned except Alicia's. Special Agent Laura Bennett entered first, her gray suit dry despite the rain outside, her expression calm enough to make the room colder. Two federal agents followed behind her, carrying a slim evidence case and a folder sealed with red tape. No one spoke. Even Officer Whitaker seemed to forget how to breathe for a second. Laura walked down the center aisle with the steady pace of someone who had waited months for a room like this to become quiet enough for the truth. Judge Harper watched her approach. "Identify yourself for the record," the judge said. Laura stopped beside the prosecution table and lifted her credentials. "Special Agent Laura Bennett, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division. We are here pursuant to an active federal warrant and a sealed investigative order involving Officer Daniel Ray Whitaker." The name sounded different when she said it. He was no longer the respected officer, no longer the reliable witness, no longer the man whose uniform had filled the room with automatic trust. He was a subject, a file, a name inside the machinery he had once believed belonged only to him. Whitaker stood suddenly. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding." Judge Harper's eyes did not move from Agent Bennett. "Sit down, officer." He remained standing for half a second too long, then lowered himself back into the witness chair, his face tight, with the effort of obeying in public. Agent Bennett placed the sealed folder on the clerk's desk. The investigation began 9 months ago after repeated complaints involving evidence inconsistencies, missing camera footage, and racially selective stops connected to Officer Whitaker's patrol history. The courtroom absorbed each phrase slowly. Evidence, inconsistencies, missing footage, racially selective stops. They were clean words for dirty things, the kind of words institutions use when pain has to be made readable on paper. Alicia looked at Mrs. Turner in the back row. The old woman's hands had stopped shaking, not because she was calm, but because she was bracing herself. Agent Bennett continued. Special Agent Monroe was assigned undercover after internal review showed a pattern that could not be explained by chance, geography, or standard patrol activity. During the operation, Officer Whitaker conducted an unlawful stop, made false statements, and generated a report contradicted by video, audio, and physical evidence. The prosecutor closed his file without making a sound. Marcus Reed stared at Alicia with something close to awe, but she did not meet his eyes. She was watching Whitaker. He had turned pale, but the anger was still there beneath the fear. Men like him did not lose power all at once. They first tried to rename the loss. "This is political," he said. "This is a setup." Alicia finally turned toward him. "No," she said softly. "A setup is what you did when you wrote evidence into a pocket that was never there." The words landed with the simplicity of a door closing. Agent Bennett opened the evidence case and removed a tablet. "With the court's permission," she said, "we can display the relevant recording." Judge Harper nodded. The clerk connected the screen. For a moment, the monitor showed only gray static. Then the parking lot appeared, wet pavement shining beneath a broken streetlight, Alicia standing still in her brown coat, Whitaker's patrol car parked behind her. His voice came through the speakers, clear and unmistakable. "Nobody is going to believe this over me." The room froze. Whitaker shut his eyes. Alicia did not. She kept them open, not because it was easy to hear, but because too many people had heard words like that with no recorder running, no agent nearby, no judge listening. The clip ended. Silence followed, heavier than any verdict. Judge Harper looked down at the badge on Whitaker's chest, then back at his face. "Officer Whitaker," she said, "this court is suspending your testimony and referring this matter for immediate federal action." Agent Bennett gave a small nod to the agents behind her. They stepped forward, calm, professional, and inevitable. Alicia watched as Whitaker looked once more at the coat, the evidence folder, the screen, and finally at her. For the first time all morning, he seemed to understand that she had never been the one on trial. The agents stopped a few feet from the witness box, close enough for Whitaker to understand what was coming, far enough to show the room that no one needed force to make power fall. Agent Bennett's voice remained even. "Officer Whitaker, you are being taken into federal custody pending charges related to obstruction, false statements, civil rights violations, and evidence tampering." Whitaker looked at Judge Harper, then at the prosecutor, then at the rows of people behind him who had once been nothing more than background to his authority. No one stood for him. No one rushed to explain him away. The courtroom that had trusted his uniform only minutes earlier now watched the uniform become smaller around him. "I want my union representative," he said, his voice rough at the edges. "You will have access to counsel," Agent Bennett replied. Alicia lowered her eyes for a moment, not because she pitied him, but because she refused to let satisfaction become the shape of her justice. She had seen what happened when people began to enjoy another person's fear. It made them careless. It made them cruel. She had not spent months buried inside Whitaker's world just to become a reflection of it. The agents secured him calmly and professionally. The small sound of metal closing around his wrists traveled through the room with a strange finality. Mrs. Turner began to cry harder then, but she did not cover her face this time. She watched. She watched for her son, for every unanswered phone call, for every night she had sat beside a kitchen table full of paperwork she did not understand, trying to prove that Jamal was more than a police report. Whitaker was guided down from the witness box. As he passed Alicia, he stopped for half a breath. His eyes were not apologetic. Not yet. They were stunned, angry, humiliated. "You ruined my life," he said under his breath. Alicia looked at him, and the sadness in her face was quieter than any insult he had expected. "No, Officer Whitaker. I recorded what you did with yours." The words did not chase him. They simply stood there after he was led away. Judge Harper called a recess, but no one moved right away. It was as if the room had to relearn how to be a room after becoming a mirror. The prosecutor gathered his files with unsteady hands. Marcus Reed stood beside Alicia, searching for language big enough for what had happened and finding none. Finally, he said, "I am sorry." Alicia turned to him. "For what?" "For assuming you needed me to save you." A small breath passed through her, almost a laugh, almost grief. "You showed up, Mr. Reed. That matters." He looked down, ashamed and grateful at once. Agent Bennett approached the defense table and handed Alicia a second folder. "We have enough to reopen 7 cases immediately, possibly more once Internal Affairs releases the full archive." Alicia accepted the folder but did not open it. She already knew some of the names inside. Jamal Turner, Renee Watkins, Calvin Brooks, others who had been made small by paperwork, by fear, by the kind of lie that wears official language. From the back row, Mrs. Turner rose slowly. Her knees seemed unsure, but her eyes were fixed on Alicia. She walked down the aisle with one hand on the bench backs for balance. No bailiff stopped her. No judge interrupted. When she reached Alicia, she did not speak at first. She simply took Alicia's hands in both of hers. Warm, trembling, real. "My boy," she whispered. Alicia's throat tightened. "We are going to look at his case again." Mrs. Turner nodded, but her tears were not only for the case. They were for being believed while still alive to feel it. Alicia squeezed her hands gently. The room remained quiet around them. Not empty quiet, not defeated quiet, but the kind that comes after a storm has passed and people are afraid to move too fast because the air finally feels clean. After the recess was called, the courtroom did not empty all at once. People rose slowly, gathering coats and files with the careful movements of those who had just watched something permanent shift. The same wooden benches that had held suspicion now held silence. The same lights that had made Alicia's coat look poor and tired now shone across the federal folder in her hand, across Mrs. Turner's fingers still wrapped around hers, across the empty witness box where Officer Whitaker had sat only minutes before. Judge Harper remained on the bench, looking down at the evidence table. The brown coat lay there beside the sealed envelope and the printed stills from the recording, no longer a symbol of accusation, but the thing that had broken the lie open. Alicia gently released Mrs. Turner's hands and promised that someone from the bureau would call her before the day ended. Mrs. Turner nodded, pressing the twisted tissue to her mouth, but she did not look lost anymore. She looked tired in the way people look after carrying hope too far and finally being allowed to set it down. Marcus Reed gathered his papers, then stopped when he noticed the faint marks on Alicia's wrists. He did not mention them. Some wounds did not need to be named in public to be honored. Instead, he placed her notepad on top of her folder and said, "You left this downstairs." Alicia accepted it with a small nod. "Thank you." He wanted to say more, but the words would have crowded the moment, so he simply stepped back. Agent Bennett waited near the aisle. "We have a car outside," she said. Alicia looked once toward the side door where Whitaker had been led away. The hallway beyond it was empty now, polished and pale, carrying only the fading echo of footsteps. For months, Alicia had imagined this ending as sharp, maybe even satisfying. But standing there, she felt no victory rising in her chest. Only the heavy quiet of work finally beginning. 7 cases reopened. Maybe more. Mothers to call. Files to read. People to tell that the system had not forgotten them completely, even if it had taken far too long to remember. She walked to the evidence table and touched the edge of the brown coat. It was still damp at the hem. Ordinary fabric. Ordinary thread. The kind of coat any woman might wear to work, to the grocery store, to a bus stop, to a courthouse where strangers decide whether her voice weighs less than a badge. Alicia folded it carefully, not as evidence now, but as something that had done its job. Judge Harper stood. Special Agent Monroe. Alicia looked up. The judge's face was solemn, stripped of courtroom distance. "This court owes you an apology." Alicia held the coat against her arm. "No, Your Honor," she said softly. "The people he lied about deserve that first." Judge Harper lowered her eyes, accepting the correction not as insult, but as truth. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The pavement shone under a thin wash of afternoon light, and the flag above the steps moved in a clean wind. Alicia stepped through the doors with Agent Bennett beside her, the folder tucked under one arm, the coat over the other. Behind her, inside the courtroom, a bailiff placed Whitaker's badge into an evidence tray. The small metal sound carried farther than anyone expected. Alicia paused at the top of the steps and breathed in the wet air. No speeches, no applause, no raised fist. Just a black woman standing in daylight after being called guilty, holding the proof that she had never been small. Then she walked down the courthouse steps, one at a time, while the clouds opened just enough for the sun to touch the path ahead.